everyone, and welcome to another Scots Whay Hae podcast. And today I'm joined by musician Callum Baird, who is the man behind Elgin The Marbles, whose debut album The Sun Never Sets is out now with Last Night From Glasgow. It is out now, Callum, isn't it?
It is out now, yep.
Well, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So first of all, tell us about Elgin The Marbles. First of all, the name, where did it come from? What does it relate to?
Well, some of the songs came first, to be honest, before the name. So the album is The Sun Never Sets. It's about the state of modern Britain. There's a little bit of kind of British Empire theme going on there. And one of the first single of the album that we released is called The British Museum. And it's all about, it's a kind of short history of colonialism across 5 verses. And do you know, when I recorded the album about a year and a half ago, I actually went into the studio thinking that I was just going to do this for myself. I was going to keep it. It was a hobby, and I wasn't thinking about releasing it at that point. And then after I kind of got the mixes back, I'd spent a lot of time in it, and I got so involved in it. I thought, well, I can't just do nothing with this. And then it came to me, well, I'm going to need a name for this. I'm going to need something to release out on. And given the fact that the album's kind of British Museum is kind of at the heart of the album, I had a long list of about 20 names that I wanted to call this project, and that was the one that I picked.
I think Elgin's actually a really good first name. I've never thought about that before, but it works well. And it is a kind of State of the Nation album. And it's interesting that you thought you might just do it for yourself, because it's a big undertaking to take on these things. It would have been a shame, I think, if you'd thought, right, I've done this, I'm pleased with it, lock it away and move on to whatever's next. Yeah,
well, I have a day job, I have other things to do, I'm not a full-time musician, and the songs kind of came out. I hadn't been writing for a while, and then over the last kind of 2-3 years, just started to write little bits and pieces, and then the songs started to collect, and I had 5-6, and I was starting to think, there's a concept coming together here, there's a possible album, and at that point you're thinking about closers and openers and title tracks and what's it going to be called, and your mind jumps ahead a little bit as you picture the final project. But yeah, even going into the studio, I kind of thought, like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this, and actually kicking myself, because the whole studio process we were in for a couple of months on and off, didn't take a single picture. I not a single picture of myself, and if I'd known how much social media content you need when releasing an album these days, I would have liked to have known that from the start and gone all in on getting some of that and recording it and documenting it, because I feel like I've missed that. But Elgin The Marbles is what we came up with.
I think we'll talk about the process of releasing an album later, because I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in that. But you talked about taking pictures. Let's start with the cover. It's got individual well-known figures on the cover. How did you come up with that?
Yeah, I always kind of, there's a lot of it's kind of name dropping on the album, but there's a lot of characters that appear in the album. They're either mentioned or they're kind of sitting in the background. Yeah. But a lot of the lyrics are very political. They talk about the state of modern Britain. There's songs about politics, about current affairs, and therefore the kind of people that you might expect to pop up on those kind of songs, Boris Johnson, George Osborne, people like that, do appear on the album. And there's also the kind of,
when you say do appear on the album, they're on the cover, they're not.
They're not. Sorry, George isn't singing backing vocals on anything. But I see
that would be a coup.
He's got a million jobs, so I'm surprised. It's probably the only thing he's not doing. But yeah, and there's a lot of kind of historical figures in there. So the concept of the album is a little bit about that sort of almost spasm of empire that kind of happened post-Brexit, where people were starting to reimagine Britain's kind of role in the world as this sort of, and as part of that concept, there are mentions of, Francis Drake, Nelson, these kind of characters appear there, and it kind of got to the point that I had so many of them that I was kind of thinking, let's get them all on the album cover in some way. So the album cover is basically a kind of collage of I'd say maybe 20-25 of these kind of characters, villains, people on the album, against the backdrop of the British Museum in ruins, effectively.
Yeah. It's got a touch of the Sgt. Pepper's about it, I think.
It's got a touch of the Sgt. Pepper's about it. It's got a touch of the kind of Cold War Steve about it, I think, as well. The sort of the guy who he always kind of photoshopped Phil Mitchell into
things.
Right, into things, yeah. So it's got a touch of that about it. It does also have a touch of the Sgt. Pepper's, yeah, definitely.
Well, I think partly because you're front and centre, kind of resplendent in what I would call a frock coat. I don't know if that's the right thing of doing it as well. You said you didn't take many pictures, but where did that one come from?
Well, we did that photo shoot for the first single,
right.
really, and there's lots of Empire-ness about the album and lots of references to the British Empire, and it kind of felt like a natural sort of eye-catching way to kind of kick off the project. And I mean, I think it was as far as I can tell, there's only one picture of Lord Elgin, right. Possibly two paintings that were done of him,
okay.
And that photo shoot was based on one of them, basically. So we tried to copy Lord Elgin. And
to go into the themes, I mean, you mentioned Brexit. It's kind of post-Brexit, post-referendum. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is. It is. So I'm a journalist and editor in my day job, and the songs are massively inspired from that kind of period of my life where I was so submerged in the Brexit process and, Boris Johnson, the sort of conveyor belt or revolving door of prime ministers that were kind of kicking about at the time. I was in the office staying up late for Brexit votes about things that I can't even remember what they were for, like the Malthouse Compromise or whatever that was, but seemed like the most kind of important thing in the time. And then I think just a lot of that journalism inspired definitely the lyricism of the album, I think.
And because it's looking to the past as well, what kind of did you come to any conclusions? I mean, was Brexit the end of something? Were there other things that were the end of something?
I'm not sure. It's really interesting. It's really topical. I read something online about obviously the album's The Sun Never Sets, right? And The Sun Never Sets is from the phrase, the sun never sets from the British Empire,
sure.
Which meant that 100 years ago, no matter what time it was in the world, what time zone it was, the sun was always shining on British territory, whether it's like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, or whatever. And as I was kind of writing the album and looking at it, I read that this Chagos Islands deal, which is obviously very kind of topical at the moment.
Sure.
But as those islands are handed over, now they might not be now, but if they were handed over, that would actually be the first time in 200 odd years that the sun actually sets on British territory throughout the world. So I found that really kind of interesting fact, and it amused me, and that kind of fed into the album. So I don't know whether in my head I'm thinking, well, that's the end of that almost, and that sort of inspired some of the songs.
Sure. And it's been out for a while, as I say. What's the feedback been like to it?
Oh, do you know, the feedback's been really good. We've had really kind of great reviews. Everybody seems to be reacting positively to it. I had a couple of wobbles over the period where I was thinking, are people not going to get that this is satirical?
Well, I was going to ask you that actually, because I mean, it's one of the problems with satire, isn't it? Especially maybe today, where how do you satire certain things and certain people? Was that a concern that you might get people going, oh yes, this is celebrating what we think is
exactly
wrong?
So I did this. So it was out on Last Night From Glasgow, and I met Ian, the kind of one, and we discussed doing the album, and he seemed really keen on it. And then we were like a month down the line or whatever, and I'd filed the kind of sleeve and the track listing. And I got an email back saying, well, wait a minute, what have we kind of committed to here? And I was like, no, trust me, it's fine. But obviously, if you just take that cover and maybe you just look at the track listing, you might think, is this sort of right-wing kind of British nationalism? But, I mean, thankfully, you should just listen to the songs, and that's very clear that it's not,
Absolutely.
The one that I was kind of most worried about, there's a song called Stop the Boats, which is, it kind of takes you through 200 years of British naval history and sort of contrasts that with Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
Right. And the chorus is basically just a really kind of catchy, we got to stop the boats. And that's one that I always am very careful to not sing around the house in case my daughter goes into school. It's just singing the chorus, and and I get an angry letter from the school about it. So I was a little bit worried about that, but thankfully, like, the reviews everyone seemed to have got it. They've taken the time to listen to it. They've got the concept, and people seem to be enjoying it.
It's so interesting. It's come out on vinyl. It's with Last Night From Glasgow. It would do so. It's a proper long player, a proper LP, and I think that almost encourages people to listen to the thing as a whole.
Yeah.
You mentioned the word concept, and I think you could say it's a concept album, absolutely. And I think you're more likely to get people listening and understanding the whole. I guess in the current kind of media world where things are clipped and people don't investigate them, they go at the surface rather than the depth. You could imagine that album cover hanging on somebody's wall and you go, look, all my heroes are here. It's really interesting though that you said, you didn't, you maybe missed a chance with social media and taking pictures of all those things. I mean, was that something that you thought, I should be doing more of that? Do you think that's something you should be doing more of? Side of things?
One of the things that I'm incredibly grateful to Ian and Last Night From Glasgow for is basically kind of sitting down with me and planning out the release schedule, which if I hadn't done it with them, I probably would have dropped it on Spotify one day and then just wondered why people aren't listening to it, right? But we had the kind of 8-9 month release schedule, single 1, single 2, single 3. I mean, this was an artist that didn't exist at the time. There was no Instagram page, there was no Facebook page, so it was all new. So having that time over that kind of period to start to build an audience, so that by the time the album's out, you've already kind of got people engaged, has made a massive difference. And I think that's it's been really good for me.
Yeah, because I mean they've been going for quite a few years now. I think 10 or more, and so that they've learnt, I guess, a process that works.
Yeah, they've got a template, I guess.
And that's really quite difficult.
In a good way.
Yeah.
And I think, it's the 10th, they've got an anniversary gig next month, I think, which I've got tickets for. But yeah, no, that was really, really useful. And, beyond just the kind of, here's what to do in this month and here's what to do, it's because they're involved, it's just massively pushed me to do more and more so that I don't let them down, having taken a chance on us. So I definitely wouldn't have done anywhere near the kind of the work and put in the work that I haven't done without them.
And we've talked a little bit about the music and the themes and lyrics. To sit down, and you say some of these songs have been about for a wee while.
I'd say they're kind of 3-4 years.
Oh, yeah,
maybe
so
max, but
it covers the time period almost.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that seems. When did you realise that it was going to be a kind of concept as a whole? Was it always the case from the start? And then did you start writing songs to fit that?
Yeah, I definitely did at one point. Yeah, so I had kind of. I started writing again. I had 3, 4, 5 kind of good songs, and at that point you're kind of thinking, right. You start to think ahead and you start to think about the album, and you start because everything's an album, right? I mean, I wouldn't be releasing single songs. I love albums.
Yeah, sure.
Right, and I especially love doing this on vinyl, like you mentioned earlier, because it's also made me think about side 1, side 2, side 2 opener, and all these kind of things that I hadn't really thought about before, but I think I've kind of carefully planned for. But I think when I wrote the British Museum, which was, I always had the line. We'll take all the world's problems and put them in the British Museum, and I had that for ages. I just couldn't figure out what to do with it, and I went down to visit it on a kind of trip, and I took a notebook and I wandered around and basically tried to be inspired by the sort of things that were there, and then quickly quite wrote that when I came back, and that song is written from the perspective of, well, you could maybe say the curator or the museum or the British Empire, depending on the verse. But it kind of unlocked that way of writing about those subjects, i.e. doing it from like the baddie's voice, for want of a better word, right? And then that allowed me to then write about the buy-to-let property market, for example, in my house, from the perspective of a landlord who's just absolutely loving that he's raking in all this cash from the 20 properties that he owns, and you can't get on the housing ladder because he's bought the flat you wanted. And doing it in that kind of like satirical voice sort of unlocked the way to kind of write about the album, and that kind of drew the concept together. I mean, there's not every song on the album fits the concept.
No.
There are love songs, and there's but there's a kind of common thread of the villains or whatever telling their story through it, I think.
There's also a common thread, I think, in the music as well, and I'm interested. Other people who are perhaps involved. What did you play yourself? How did it work? What was the recording process like?
Yeah, so do you know what? I emailed round a few kind of studios in Glasgow, and Paul from 45 Aside Studios in Bridgeton came back to me and said, "Look, do you want to come in and discuss this? I really like the demos that you kind of sent in." And I said, "Yeah, okay." And I'd kind of done stuff in the house, home recording, but I hadn't properly worked with a producer. And we just kind of planned out the album from there. So I play, I sing, I play acoustic guitar, and I play harmonica. But that's it. We got in musicians to do the kind of, you know, the other guitar parts, to do drums. Paul, producer, did bass. My wife played violin and viola, and it worked. It worked really, really well. We were able to kind of rattle through the songs really kind of quickly. Paul, the producer, was just brilliant at spotting what we should do with any of these kind of songs.
Okay.
I would say they come fully formed. Like I've got, you know, I know that, so I'm not rewriting the songs, but we're thinking about the arrangements and what we do with them in the studio. And there's definitely little things here and there that I'm like, oh yeah, I love that we did that. I love that we overlapped those vocals at that point, whereas in my demo they were kind of, you know, one after the other, that sort of thing.
I was going to ask who played the harmonica, because there's some great harmonica on it.
Thank you.
Absolutely, I love it. I love a bit of harmonica myself. And then, so in terms of the music, did you always know kind of how it would sound, or was that part of the process?
One of the really interesting things about releasing this album sort of out into the wild is people before were asking me, what kind of music is it?
Yeah.
And I just found it so difficult to answer. I was kind of thinking, like, it's kind of indie folk, it's kind of alt folk, maybe. This is Americana in there, kind of definitely.
These are all things I've written down,
Yeah. But I think, like, what sort of surprised me is that the number of kind of mentions of punk in the reviews, and not in the sense of, like, you know, thrashing guitars and like, right, but in the spirit of the lyrics and the attitude, right? So I think it's kind of, I really liked Record Collector magazine called it melodic folk with overriding punk spirit, right? Which I thought was, that's it, that's great. That's kind of described it in a way that I couldn't before, you know. Yeah,
because I mean, we mentioned the cover maybe having inspiration from Sgt. Pepper's, but I think the feel of it has got inspiration from Nevermind the Bollocks. You know, there's that 100%. Kind of feel to it. And I've been talking a lot about punk recently. There's a lot of books coming out this year, 50 years. Yeah, it's coming out. And what kind of screams through is that really it's not about the music, really it is about the attitude and the change and all those things, and that can apply to arts across the board as well.
And writing about politics, right? And talking about politics and singing about politics, you know, and having an attitude about politics and calling people out and calling injustice out or whatever, you know, and there definitely is. I mean, there's lots of that on the record.
So you mentioned you're a newspaper man, editor, a number of titles. How was working in the medium, you maybe touched on this a bit, but how does working in the media kind of infiltrate the album? How does it feed into the album?
Do you know, honestly, I think what it's done is, I was editor of The National for 7 years during this kind of period that I'm sort of talking about. I'm now editor-in-chief of the kind of wider group that contains other titles, but basically I've spent 10 years in a really kind of basic way working on other people's words and tightening up and rewriting other people's words. I mean, that's the job of an editor. And I think the single biggest influences, other than the subject matter, so I know lots of niche things about politics that come up in the album that maybe, you know, the average person might not know, but it's tightened my lyric writing, definitely. Right. So I feel like my job is basically to get a 800 word piece into a 500 word piece and have it better. So doing that and applying that to the lyrics has been massive.
No, I think that's right. Sometimes editing other people's words can definitely help your own writing.
Oh, it makes you a better writer. Yeah, definitely. And I came up in journalism as a sub-editor, right, on newspapers. So just taking people's words, and even great writers sometimes, you know, need tightened up a little bit or whatever, and then applying that, you know, to your own sort of practice and to your own words and tightening it up and just using there's so many words on the album, it's very, very light, but using as few words in each line to kind of nail the point, you know.
And it is very informed, you know. This isn't someone who's just kind of, you know, read a copy of The Guardian that fell open on the train. You know, you can see the kind of detail and knowledge that you've got in it. Does the album come with a lyric sheet?
It does.
Fantastic. It does. Because that's one that you could probably sit down.
It's in something like size 5 font or something because we had to shrink the words down so much to kind of get them in over 2 pages because there is a lot of words on the album. Yeah.
And how have the changes in this is going on to kind of newspapers, I suppose, more than anything else, but I want to kind of take it on to other things too. But how did the changes in the medium itself, has that kind of changed the message, for want of a word, how you get news out there? And, you know, were you thinking about that at all when you were doing something long form, which an album is long form?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and I've been through the last sort of 12 to 15 years of the newspaper industry, but massive change. But saying that, you know, when I got into it, I was told, print's dead, you know, you're not going to have print newspapers in 5 years' time. And here we are, 12, 13 years later, we are selling a lot of printed newspapers. Yeah. And I think we'll still be doing that in 15, 20 years pretty comfortably. So what's happened in news, I think, certainly in my company and with my titles, is that we are going back towards original, quality, exclusive journalism. I'm not saying that it was lost for a while, because it wasn't, but I think the kind of digital subscription pay for news model is much more ubiquitous now than it's ever been. Yeah. And then what that does is sort of increases the propensity to pay for news within the country, frankly, you know. So we've always in the UK had a really low propensity to pay for digital news because of the BBC, because the view is that the BBC News is free and it does all these things. If you compare it to Scandinavia, where the similar thing doesn't exist, there's much more people are willing to pay for news. But I think that's shifting as more and more kind of news titles use paywalls, launch paywalls. It sort of rises all boats, really. And people start realising, well, okay, I'm gonna have to pick one that I like and go with that. And we're benefiting from that now. And it's allowing us to invest back into journalism, and it's allowing us to do the kind of stuff that we should be doing: long form, exclusive, original writing. Yeah,
I mean, I'm thinking about other forms as well. Their kind of death has been kind of foretold, and actually it hasn't happened. Vinyl's a cracking example about, you know, that I've got, and so many albums are now coming out on vinyl for the first time because they were in that CD age where it wasn't happening. Books, you know, the death of the bookshop, the death of, you know, Kindle killing the paperback and all that. It's absolutely reversed. So it is interesting. And going back to how you were going to promote the album, and, you know, a lot of bands are using social media to do those things. Was there advice from Last Night From Glasgow about that as well, or were they kind of like, no, this is how we do it, and it's a different audience? Or whatever?
No, I mean, I think they're quite hands off with your own social pages, right? They'll obviously help out with what they do from their own branded pages. But I mean, luckily over the last 12 years, I've also had to run and launch brands, run social media accounts. So I know. You know, what people should be doing in terms of on Facebook, what mix of posts they should be doing, all those kind of things I kind of already have from the publishing background. But the difference is I'm used to posting on one of our titles, you know, 60 times a day or something, and thinking about that kind of mix of posts. So the slight difference is that, you know, with your kind of band page or whatever, you might be thinking about, you know, once a day, maybe once every 2 days, and really kind of getting a really good post is more the kind of thought. But no, I've had the experience of working in news definitely helps with that. That's
kind of, I think, what I was getting at when I wondered how working in the job has kind of affected releasing the music, and if that's because, you know, you said you wanted to make this music, you wanted to give it a shot initially just for yourself. Those thoughts probably never come round, but actually now that it's out, do they start to infiltrate and you go, I know how I could do this. I know how I would do this if it was someone else, or if it was a publication, or whatever it might be.
Well, I mean, listen, I'm on the other side of press releases, right? So I get press releases, and I get hundreds and thousands of press releases, you know, every week, every month. So you kind of learn
how to catch people's attention.
Yeah, I think also that you also have to be careful that you don't, like, my attitude to it isn't everyone's attitude to it. No. Yeah, there is a kind of slightly more nuanced kind of approach that you do need with it. But you know, I know what doesn't work, and I know the sort of basics of it, and I know, you know, you have to follow up 2 times before anybody kind of gets it. You know, the first time, don't just send an email and think it's done. You know, you need to follow up. So the principles of PR, I guess, are incredibly linked to journalism.
And how have you found the whole thing of getting an album from the songs in your head, recording it, to then eventually having the vinyl in your hand?
I've absolutely loved it. I think getting the vinyl and seeing the vinyl for the first time, and because the cover is so striking as well, you know,
absolutely,
it really does. I mean, it looks great in a kind of collection. And actually, I think it wasn't the first time I'd seen it because I had a copy myself. But I went round to Ian from Last Night From Glasgow's flat. He does gigs in there sometimes. So I went round to a gig, and as you might expect, there's a massive record collection. Right?
Yes, I've been there, I've seen it. Yeah.
Collection, and I was just kind of looking through it or whatever, and I got to E, and I was just, I wonder if it, and it was there, it was sitting there, and I pulled it out, and I just thought, this is cool.
Yeah,
like, it's in this kind of big record collection of a kind of serious collector.
And did you have it? Was it made with Seabass vinyl?
It was.
Yeah, so I've had them on the radio show talking about what they do. It's another great independent setup.
Yeah, a great, you know, Scottish business as well. Definitely, no. I know it's great. I wasn't involved in the kind of, you know, Ian and Last Night From Glasgow took care of all the production of it, but they've done it. I mean, the clarity of the kind of image and the cover is beautiful, and the records are kind of orange, sort of sunset orange, limited edition vinyl looks great as well. And
in terms of music, has it always been important to you? Were you always kind of playing it from a young age?
Yeah, always playing music, always writing music really throughout my 20s. Did lots of kind of stuff. Didn't massively kind of. I did a few gigs and stuff throughout that kind of period, but not massively pushing it. And then when I got the job in journalism, it was all encompassing for a while, and particularly when you're the editor of a title and you're responsible for that edition every day. You know, you're there from kind of 9:30 till 10. You know, there's no time for anything else. But it's also less a time thing. It's about where you put your creative energy, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you know, my creative energy was spent on the National during those years, and on creating, you know, those front pages that kind of would go viral or whatever, and reporting on that kind of period, the design of the front pages, the design of the paper, the creative kind of storytelling of all those big news stories. And I think if you're doing that and you're spending that creativity on that, it leaves you with very little left, and the kind of weekends that you just want to chill and relax and not have another big creative project to kind of work on, you know.
Was it always going to be an album? Because I say that you know, the themes in it could have been a State of the Nation book, fiction or non-fiction.
No, I think it's always an album. Yeah.
That kind of dream thing.
I see myself as a songwriter, and you know, and I think I the minute you start writing songs, like I've said before, you jump ahead to the album. Even now, you know, the funny thing about the album release schedule is I actually finished this album last February, so I've had another year of you know, writing. You don't stop, and I've got, I'd say, maybe 7, 8, 9 songs of what might become Elgin The Marbles 2, but already you're thinking, well, what's the name of the album, what's the closing, what's the thing, even before you're anywhere near the studio. So I might get to the studio this winter, I don't know, but already in my head I'm sort of thinking about the shape. You
reckon there will be an album 2 in you?
Well, I think so, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's near, I nearly have the songs, and it's definitely something that I want to do. I think it's more maybe kind of sign of the times, but it's shaping up a little bit more thematically to be about internet and internet culture, and rather than post-Brexit politics, which is kind of what this one's about. So I don't know, it's kind of shaping up nicely, but there's definitely a couple of missing pieces, I think, that I still haven't found.
Did music, favourite albums or bands or whatever, kind of help you to understand the world? Because it seems to me that you're writing these songs in part to kind of help you understand how you feel about certain things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the music that I love to listen to has clever lyrics, and not necessarily always about kind of current affairs or what's happening in the world, but I'm a lyrics. If there's something really kind of clever lyrically, and it's got a good kind of catchy hook that gets stuck at that, I mean, I love it no matter what kind of genre it is or whatever. So obviously, I love the kind of classic sort of American songwriters of the sort of 60s and 70s. But kind of growing up, it was sort of Bright Eyes and Conor Roberts that were sort of big inspirations. You can definitely hear on the record.
I think so, absolutely. But older, like Dylan and
100%, of course,
Cohen and these people as well. We haven't spoken about anything live. You did a launch gig, did you?
Yeah, so all my energy has been on the kind of the release and getting the press around that, and we did a launch gig in the record store, Last Night From Glasgow record store. We're doing I've been asked back to do something on Record Store Day there as well, so we'll be doing some live stuff with a few other artists from the label, and just off the back of the release, off the back of some of the coverage, I've kind of started to organically get a couple of requests through for support gigs and stuff. So I'm going to start doing that, and once the album's kind of out there and the release sort of period window is done, I'm going to start looking at that.
And would you ever do a bigger band? Would you ever think about doing a kind of try and replicate the album at all?
Yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah, it would have to be the right gig and the right venue to kind of pull everybody together for it. I normally play live, kind of Bob Dylan style with an acoustic guitar and harmonica, and I think it's good. I think it works, and obviously it's just practically
absolutely.
Which is why probably try to get a few of them going and then maybe build to something with the band.
I mean, it's happened quite a lot over the last few years. It's probably always happened, but I've noticed it is that bands who are full bands often when you see them live, but the album is flexible in terms of who can play it and how many can play it and all those things. So from full band with backing singers to just acoustic and solo. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit with you about how arts is covered today, and at the moment in this city in Glasgow, it's a real kind of hot topic with CCA around the corner closing.
Yeah.
Glasgow, Trongate 103 closing, and just more, I'm not going to ask you on individual things, but in general, the way that kind of arts coverage is.
Yeah,
threatened, is that the right word? But you know what I mean. It's
it's the right word. I mean, I think one of the problems is that there aren't many opportunities for young people to write about the arts and come into arts journalism jobs.
Sure.
Right. I mean, I think that's been the case probably for 10 years now. There are probably fewer arts journalists working in Scotland now than there, almost certainly than there were 10 years ago. But there's still a lot of good ones. I think the kind of flagship brand that we've got here is the Herald. We do a lot of arts. We are, it's a bit of a spoiler, but we are investing in the arts this year. So we're going to have. I try to pick my words carefully to not reveal too much, but we're going to have a big push on the arts this year across the Herald. We're going to bring in voices. We're investing in commissioning some stories on it. We want to take the kind of approach that we've taken to other sectors, sport, for example, education. We've done some really kind of good stuff, and we want to kind of roll that out to the arts, because I think the difference that we're seeing now that we weren't able to see before is the direct return on investment on different types of journalism, i.e. somebody, let me think about how to phrase this. So someone might only read this article 300 times, right? But 10 people signed up and paid for it on the back. 10 people signed up for a subscription. Now I think 10 years ago they would have looked at that and said 300 people, stop doing that. Whereas now we think 10, that's amazing. Like, let's, although it's a small number, if you add up 10 across a number of articles, you end up with thousands of subscribers, right? And there was a really interesting piece about the Irish Times the other day on Press Gazette, and I think we're in this place too, is that they're saying, well, we do more book reviews now than we've ever done, because we know, we can prove in the numbers that it works for us. I think we are starting to see that now, or have been seeing that in the Herald over the last 2 years, where reviews in particular do really, really well and people like them. Conversely, things like previews don't work as well. So there's interesting nuances behind it. But I think there's a lack of kind of like meaty sort of arts news reporting as well, and big in-depth reads about, for example, the CCA, the inside story of what really happened. And I think we want to try to get into that gap as well. And we've got some really great journalists, from Brian Ferguson obviously now with us, and various other kind of people that we want to invest in. So listen, I think I can only really speak for our own sort of business, but I think we're quite excited about what we can do around the arts this year.
That's really heartening to hear, because I know certainly in terms of coverage of books and reviews of books, and a lot of the press had kind of, that used to maybe get a full page, used to get a section out, and that has changed over as well. But going back to what we talked about at the beginning, perhaps the death foretold is not. It's things can change the other direction as well.
Things change. The difficulty, obviously, with book reviews is the practicality of how long it takes you to read a book and then review it versus a film. In simple terms, that's the challenge for us. Is that how do we kind of how do we make sure that we do that, but we make it kind of work for us as a business level. But we've got across all our brands, we've 54,000 subscribers now paying for our journalism in some form. Some it's on sports brands, some it's in the Herald, the National. But now that we've got that, we can then start to be a bit more confident about the decisions and the commissioning things that we make, and we can start to take chances in a way that we probably weren't able to do 5 years ago. And take a punt on sending, this is again a sports example, but sending someone to Naples to find out what people think about Scott McTominay or whatever, that would have just been nah, we're not doing that, it's too expensive 5 years ago. So we want to invest. We want to take creative risks in our commissioning, and we think we've got a good year ahead.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And I had a thought about it, maybe in terms of television, but we're now much more likely to subscribe to a television streamer or whatever it might be. Substack's become a huge thing for writers. Subscribe to my Substack. You might have to pay, you might not. But that whole model, I think initially, I remember going to talks about it was going to destroy everything. People will expect to pay nothing for anything, and how's that going to work out? And a lot of people say that's still maybe the case, but things adapt, things change, and things kind of move on. I think. I mean, I'm always kind of sunny side. That's how I look at things. I hope that things will survive, and they tend to, but. I don't want to be kind of Pollyanna-ish and just think everything's the best in this best of all possible worlds.
No, look, it's a challenging industry to work in. There's no doubt about it. People. The truth is that people buy fewer newspapers this year than they did the year before, and that's going to continue. But what we're seeing is, for the first time, the number of people and the revenue that were coming in from digital subscriptions is making up for that. Yeah, which means we're at least kind of standing still.
And if that goes in a certain direction, then the other isn't as doomed as absolutely the case. Yeah.
And we've got so much more intelligence about what people like and what people want to read now than if you think about that when we put a newspaper out 15, 20 years ago, we as editors would think, they like that and that like that, and you can judge it by the number of letters that you get in or something, right? Sure. But now we know that 40 people signed up to a subscription because they wanted to read that article. That's brilliant. How do we do more of that? And that those kind of decision makings, which is good because it means that quite a lot of the arts in particular is kind of low audience, so not that many people read it, but people really care about it. Yes, and that's a good thing. Yeah. But it just flips the model a little bit from where it was 10 years ago, where just the number of people viewing it was king, and that was the only.
That was it. Numbers were king that way in a different way. That is really interesting. And of course, you've seen it a little bit from the other side. You've said the album's been reviewed in certain places, and that's great. That's what people who are making things want to say that. I've connected with someone, or however you might put it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been the reviews have been. I've been get a total buzz when I get another one through, and I see someone's had a look at the album and you read it and you think, God, that person's actually taken a lot of time to kind of go through it and think about it and really be considered, and has clearly not just kind of flashed through it, and it just I'm passionate about journalism and journalism of all forms, and I think we need a business model that works. I think we're building one. I don't think we're there yet in terms of it's completely sustainable for the long term. But I'm certainly a lot more positive about the future of journalism than I've been in any point in the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's just great to hear. And let's finish on a high. That was a high though. But culturally, what's kind of interesting you at the moment? Is there stuff happening about that you kind of feel interested in, whatever it might be?
Yeah, do you know I've just been so obsessed with this album release over the last kind of month or so. No, I think I kind of touched on earlier that what I'm writing about, or what I seem to be writing about. So before I launched this album, I wasn't really on social media. So I've got a Twitter that I use for an X that I use mostly for work and kind of news gathering.
Okay.
But, I wasn't on Instagram, I wasn't on Facebook, and as part of this album release, I had to do it right. I had to kind of go out there and create a page and start engaging with people, and I'm really interested in the sort of culture around that, and it's definitely feeding into my writing at the moment, and what the next album's going to be about definitely is it's going to definitely have some element of that kind of internet feed, culture, social media culture, I think.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Well, Callum, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me. I think the album's superb. It's all the things we've spoken about and more.
Thank you.
That you really can lose yourself in it. Yeah, all the very best with it.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be back soon with someone completely different.